So, Five Nights at Freddy's movie came out. I saw it in theaters. I thought it was alright. But you know who didn't think it was alright? People who aren't already familiar with Five Nights at Freddy. I'm not saying I don't understand why the movie isn't doing crazy well critically, but as a FNAF fan, I do think it is quite interesting to see the reviews from people who aren't already familiar with the source material. Because I quite enjoyed the FNAF movie, but it was in the same sort of sense as the Mario movie, where a big chunk of the enjoyment is pointing at the screen and going, oh my god, I saw that before. So when people who aren't already familiar with the movie go and watch it, then they're going in with a different thing in mind. 3 out of 10. I really wanted to like this one, says spoilers. The Five Nights at Freddy's is interesting, and while I haven't followed up with the recent Lauren games, when I was in middle and high school, I really enjoyed playing the game, especially the first 3, as I thought they were fun and had some fun scares. As a whole, there are some good moments, but it's underwhelming. So, something I've been noticing with a lot of these reviews is they believe that it's trying to be the most horrifying movie to exist. Scariest game in years, Five Nights at Freddy. But I feel like when you notice the general sort of trend the games were following, a lot of people watching this, they might have been familiar with like the first game, maybe the first couple, but in recent years, the level of horror the games are going for has gone down quite a lot. There's like the FNAF 6 mini games, like the day sections where it's all like family friendly fun, a lot of the comedic elements of like security breach, a lot of the troll games. Modern FNAF isn't really trying to be scary in the way it used to, and that's something a lot of people don't really realize. The narrative is kind of all over the place, and it feels like the writers are trying to shoehorn many ideas together in one, and it makes things messy. Yeah, I imagine a serious challenge with the FNAF movie, how many elements were brought from the games into the movie. This is supposed to be like for general audiences. This is a Blumhouse production, so it can't expect everyone to be familiar with the lore. And because of that, topics like Remnant were like scrapped in place of the bodies are still in the suits and they were never taken out. Fans familiar with FNAF are already aware of these concepts, but to a general audience that may only be familiar with the games by name, they don't really have the added context of pointing to the screen and going, oh, I know that. I'm not saying that's a problem or anything. People are allowed to interpret the movie as they wish. I do just think it's an interesting discrepancy between the ratings, where the people with lower ratings, they tend to point towards the lack of horror or the weird concepts. There's so many different things in here. The movie tries very hard to bring in as many in-jokes as possible. So you have like Matt Pat going, it's just a theory, and you have like Afton going, I always come back, including the cameos as they felt like they were just there rather than have the cameos be creative. I imagine if you're not aware of who Matthew Patrick is, you'll be very confused at why this this random restaurant man just says he has such a big screen presence for those 20 seconds he's on screen. I do think it is very important that the FNAF YouTubers do get a spotlight for the movie. And that ties back to the real story of FNAF, which I talked about in the last main channel video, where because of YouTubers covering the game, FNAF was able to be popular in the first place. It's interesting to see now that FNAF is this big mainstream like movie tie-in. Now it can sort of switch it. Now the YouTubers get to be on the big screen because of the game. Classic throwback, missing the horror element. Movie faithful to the fans. Yeah, I generally agree with that.
Such a letdown. Oh boy, we got that one big fella in school. He's gonna destroy the world with this one. I might as well start off with some positives. For one, the casting is pretty good. Hutcherson as Mike was a good choice. Matthew Lillard as Afton, even though they do nothing with him, was a good choice. The animatronics, production design, and cinematography look really good. And for the most part, the movie is very competently made. I think that's pretty much a general agreement. I think they did a great job at getting the animatronics to at least, look very similar to the actual FNAF 1 game. But now, time for the negatives. Uh-oh. For a script that apparently went through multiple drafts, the story makes no sense. There are multiple plot points and subplots that go absolutely nowhere and get no explanation. That's the average FNAF experience, which is kind of funny. You're in the right to be mad at that, but I do think that FNAF as a whole has never been great at tying loose ends, and seeing the absolute mess that is the FNAF story on like a big mainstream movie is causing the disconnect. The editing and pacing feels incredibly rushed. There were multiple scenes that barely lasted.
To be fair, I think the FNAF movie as a whole, I think it was pretty cheesy. Like 90% of the jump scares in the film was the exact same Balloon Boy joke jump scare. Too little, too late. This movie adaptation of popular video game Five Nights at Freddy's has been a long time coming. In the meantime, we've had the Banana Splits movie and Willy's Wonderland, both of which have illustrated that making a decent film about killer animatronics is no walk in the park. Avid gamers might enjoy seeing the characters come to life on the big screen, but I imagine even the most forgiving of Freddy fans would be disappointed by the lack of atmosphere, thrills, and OTT violence in this uninspired Blumhouse misfire. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Again, I feel like most of the enjoyment of the film comes from being with the series for a while. Like, that's why I personally enjoyed it. I see Matt Pat and I go like, oh my god, he said the thing. The enjoyment is very person to person. It depends on how much you care about the series before going into the movie. I feel like if you watch the movie and that's your only exposure to FNAF, you could care less. This movie is absolutely boring to the core. It makes Nicolas Cage's movie Willy's Wonderland look like a complete masterpiece, which it isn't. The movie consists of bad acting, flashback dreams, and some fluffy robots. But for the first hour or so, not so much. Actually really happens. You will struggle to actually want to watch the entire movie after being so bored already. Why is it a 15 UK? Who really knows? A little blood here, a little blood there, that's about it. Lately, anything Blumhouse touches turns to sludge rather than gold. I think that's always been Blumhouse. Although I guess they produced my favorite movie, so that's besides that one. Fans of the game will think this is a great movie for the fact they like the animatronic figures alone, but are forgetting about what makes a good movie. Yeah, I think I generally agree with that. To be fair, there's no good concrete story a lot of the time, and that's what makes turning it into a movie a challenge, because it's like, you know, how scary do we want to go, and how conclusive do we want to be, especially when it's supposed to be 3. And seeing that the FNAF movie's done quite well, I think a sequel is very much coming in the next couple years, because it's already doing great regardless of the reviews. 1 out of 10, waste of time. One of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I usually rate way better than movies deserve. I scare very easily, and absolutely none of this was the slightest bit frightening. Weak scoring, mediocre acting, so many plot holes, and low tension conflict. 1 out of 10. Lame adaptation. This is the one from the thumbnail. This started promising and had a stable premise, but it quickly got on a slippery slope. I think real fast is what that's supposed to say. The main guy is such a whiny and irresponsible emo loser. He gets a job and attacks a poor guy without asking what's going on. But that was the point. The idea was that he's like traumatized from his brother, so he just assumes the worst. That's like crying about Patrick Star for being dumb. Then he gets another job and sleeps all night instead of guarding when he's hired to guard, because he takes the sleeping pill, and on top of that he brings his sister, who by the way is young enough to be his daughter. Yeah, I was kind of confused about that for a little beginning of the movie, along for no other reason than the cover for him not doing his job. No. Five Nights at Freddy's was a pretty big letdown. I went in with the expectation to have a pretty scary fun time. Instead, what I got was a boring, cliche-riddled film. Straight from the start, you can tell this film was geared towards the younger audience. Okay, yeah, it is. There is too much setup to the story, which is not interesting at all, and not enough kills or thrills. Maybe under a different director or writer, this could have turned out to be a more enjoyable experience. Five Nights at Freddy's gets a low 4 stars out of 10 from me. Like, if you're focusing on Freddy, what would the movie be? This movie was hands down one of the worst, most boring films I've ever paid to watch. No plot, no intense scenes, no horror scenes. Everyone in the movie has no common sense, and the little girl is literally a moron. Wow, like an average child. I don't like how they stripped away Afton's motivations. Now he's like a cartoonish child murderer with no sympathetic attributes. But it's the FNAF movie, so I wasn't really expecting it to be great. I was hoping for it to either be so bad it's good, or decent enough for me to mildly enjoy it. possible the worst movie I've ever seen. Absolute garbage! Not funny, not scary, just not enjoyable. No clear story. The costume/animatronics were good, but very underused. Let's hope this put an end to this franchise before it gets going. Wait, actually that makes sense. B-movie, try not to be a B-movie. That actually sounds kind of true. Overall, Five Nights at Freddy's